You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hello, people-centric leaders. It's Bethany Taff. So we are having a great conversation today. We are having a ladies only podcast today. But if you're not a lady listening, you can still listen. That doesn't mean you're not allowed to hear this. This is actually very relevant for everybody and something that I think everybody can relate to. Specifically, a conversation that we're having is around just conflict and how often we think that conflict will just resolve itself. So I think some people are more aggressive about this kind of stuff and just want to go punch the conflict in the face. And then people freak out and don't love that. And then there's sometimes people who are really passive and they just think, you know what, if I just don't bring it up, it's going to take care of itself. And there's probably some wisdom in that to some extent. But there are probably moments where, right, we should address those tough conversations and we aren't. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And so Diana Royalty is here with us. Hey, Diana.
Hi, guys. I'm excited about this topic. I am not like a punch it in the face assertive, but I'm close to that.
I know.
So
a little bit.
Yeah, I'm close to that.
Kind of like that conversation we had yesterday where you very boldly said you didn't like something that the rest of us were like, this seems good. This seems like a good direction.
I think I said all of your brains are broken. I'm pretty sure I told all of you that. And I stand by it. So
yeah. We're not on the same page, but it's okay.
But I trust you all and it's not my place. So I'm just going to let it happen.
And we did talk about it. So
I know we did.
That's the good thing. That's the good thing. So thanks, Diana. And Stephanie Anderson is also here.
Hi, I was having a giggle while you guys were laughing because Bethany, you're like, and some of us, and Diana was like, here's an example from yesterday when Diana wanted to punch someone. And I said over lunch today how I would like to punch someone. And for the record, it was not anyone I know personally. It was a public figure, but I'm like, wouldn't it just be great if somebody would just so I think that tells you a little more where I am on the scale of confrontation. I would agree with Diana, though. I wouldn't say I'm overly assertive, but when I feel like something is not being addressed, or especially if it feels like there's injustice or someone is not being treated correctly, I become very unafraid, I guess is the word to use. I'm unafraid to address it because I feel like it needs addressing. And so I am a little more apt to point at the elephant in the room and be like, we've got to talk about that elephant. It's taking up so much space in our lives and brains versus ignoring it. I'm probably a little more on that end of the spectrum. So this will be fun.
This is good. I think it's good to see where some of our starting points are for us personally. But I think our conversations leading into this were a little bit of we've seen this within the work that we do, right? Where it seems obvious, why wouldn't they address the elephant in the room? It's obviously there. It's obviously causing issues, but maybe there's two sides. And within those two sides, they're both frustrated by it, but they're not talking to each other about it. And so what's the issue? And so maybe that's the question that I would start with is why are people avoiding those conversations? Why don't we have the tough conversations? What are the answers that we're getting from people?
Yeah, when we were prepping for this podcast, it made me think of a friend of mine who she is a little more passive at work in this way. If we're talking about that range, she is a little more on the side of if I just kind of wait, it will probably naturally resolve itself. And so sometimes the stories she'll tell me where she's avoiding conflict, it's well, it's impacting other people on the team. It's not just me. So I don't, maybe necessarily need to be the one to raise the flag. Or sometimes it's the opposite of that. I'm the only one that it seems to be bothering. And so I don't want to get anybody else upset about this or that. Or they can see a scenario in which it could resolve itself really quickly. And so they're genuinely like waiting to see if it will. But the issue with that is sometimes it doesn't. And then now it's been a longer time, which sometimes makes it even harder to address those things. And then I also think there's some fear there too, that like, what if I'm the one that points it out and that offends someone, or it creates more drama, or like, I don't want to get pulled into solving this and having to fix the whole problem. And I know if I raise my hand, then they're going to be like, well, great, Stephanie, thanks for finding that problem. Now you're going to be the one to fix it. So those are some things that I typically hear from people of when they are pointing at conflict that's been there a long time, or a problem that's been unresolved for a long time. Some of the things that I hear. And so some of them are related to like how we feel internally, and some of them are like external, like how are other people going to respond to me bringing this up?
Yeah, that's good. Diana, did you have something to add?
No, I think it's so interesting that we often feel it and know it and then just like wait. Because I think everybody, even people who are not conflict avoidant, whatever. Even people who are like, I'll address the conflict.
Yeah.
I still pause, right? I still am like, I can address that, but then I still pause and I'm like, but should I? And we deal with conflict all the time. So I just think it's really interesting how much even people who are okay with conflict avoid it at some point in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think there's something, I said this a minute ago too, of like, I do think there are probably moments where it's like, maybe you don't need to address that thing yet. Or maybe it's like, yeah, maybe it is wise to take a beat and say like, yeah, that thing will probably work itself out. How big of an issue is it? And so there's probably moments for that. I think we're just pointing to the fact that like, no, this is like, if something we've waited on too long and it's clearly causing issues within your organization or on your team or something like that, and why are we still avoiding it when it's obviously there? I had a couple of conversations that I was thinking about with this, where there was somebody that I was talking to as a manager, and she was talking about I'm sorry, I shouldn't say if it's a she or a him or a, I'll say they. If this particular manager, was managing somebody who they just said like they've had some issues with their performance on some things, even though they're really trying hard on it. And they ended up pulling some of that work away from them and giving it, kind of dispersing it across the team. And, the changes that they made seem like they're working fine. Nobody seems to be having an issue with it. And so whatever. But the question I had was like, okay, but did you tell the employee directly why that stuff was being taken from them, even if you did find a good solution for it and everybody's happy with it, and I think that's one of the important things that I think about with this conversation too, of like, that's just an example of where I felt like, okay, it's okay, but I think sometimes we skirt around issues like that when it's like somebody really needs to give this person the feedback so they know that it's like, this is something that we are having to either work around or like something you could grow and develop in. Because if you're on the other side of that and you just see work getting taken from you, that feels, you have so many questions. You start to write so many stories and you're like, man, I wish somebody would just tell me, like, did I do something wrong? Or is this being taken for a different reason? And so that was one example I was thinking of with this too. And then I think that, we were talking about, just other situations where, I don't know, like other coaching situations that I've had where the individual is really skeptical about the information that I'm talking to them about. And they're like, why am I getting coaching? And and we don't totally know what the conversations are happening on the back end. And that's because sometimes like they're not happening like they should be. And so they're just constantly questioning, like, is there info being kept from me in my work that my manager's not telling me, and getting and receiving that feedback. And so anyways, those were a couple of the situations that I was thinking about related to this topic too. So I don't know if you guys have any comments or questions or thoughts.
Yeah.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead, Diana.
Stephanie, sorry, go ahead.
We just started talking at the same time. Well, I think one thing that kind of stood out to me while you were talking, Bethany, was almost this theme of giving feedback. And when we feel like the problem that we're having to address is a person, that I think we see people be a lot more conflict avoidant. Like when they're having to point out a problem with like a process, or this part or tool doesn't work, I think people a little more naturally do that. But when they feel like it's, hey, part of the problem is how you do or do not do this, how you do or don't communicate. People tend to struggle with that a lot more, which obviously I think makes sense, right? Like most people are really nice and kind, and they don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings or upset or offend someone. But at the same time, like you said, Bethany, we've seen from our seat a lot the ripple effect of not giving that feedback and how it can impact a team. Or we've seen the moments when someone finally gets feedback after a very long time of not receiving it. And I would say it's a 50-50 reaction. Some people are like, oh my gosh, like, thank you for telling me that. But they almost always say, I wish you would have told me sooner. So even it's a positive reaction, I wish you would have told me sooner. Or the other side of that coin is we'll see people who've not been given that feedback. All of a sudden they get it, and it's a devastating blow. And sometimes they don't come back from it. Like we've seen people quit their jobs after that because they find out, you've been withholding this from me for this period of time. Or, oh my gosh, like multiple people on the team have thought this about me, and they can't kind of overcome that emotional hit or the ego hit from it. And I think, I guess I'm saying that to say that it's a good case for why you should give the feedback, because neither one of those are great outcomes, to be honest. Like even the positive one where they accept it and they take the feedback, like I said, we almost always hear people say, like, that's the first time I've ever gotten that type of feedback. And I wish I would have known sooner because I would have done so many things differently. And I hate feeling like maybe I hurt the team, or I hurt some of our work, or I could have done a better job. Like, give people that feedback. It's the kind thing to do. And I think the flag there is like, yeah, if you don't feel like you can say that kindly, or you're angry or upset, like Diana was saying earlier, like you have to check yourself for a minute and say, like, do I really need to say this? Do I need to say this right now? Am I the one who should be saying it? And there's kind of that 3-part question. We maybe talked about this in other podcasts, or that might be familiar, but just to gut check for a moment. But usually if it's something that is significant or it's impacting the team, somebody's become really toxic, and we don't want that to spread. Like the quicker you can give that feedback, it's usually a better reaction or response, or at least we get to a resolution faster.
Yeah.
I love how you were kind of talking about a culture of accountability versus a culture of blame. Like it hurts to blame other people. So anytime you can create feedback that's around a process or a procedure or whatever, it's easier, it's better, it feels less awful. But if you do have to give that direct feedback and you're putting it off, if it has to be about a person and their attitude or the words that they have spoken or how they've come off, or you're questioning their intent, whatever that is, if you don't do that, those problems create other problems. And I've just seen it where like you hold back and you're like, let's just see if that goes away. Let's just see if maybe they just need to go to bed and it's a season and they'll be fine tomorrow, which sometimes works, right? But then if you're continuing to see it and you haven't addressed it, I think that sort of problem creates more problems. And I
yeah. And don't mask a people problem with a tool or task or whatever problem. And I think sometimes like we're totally open to saying, yeah, you like if it is more around like the process or something like that, then yeah, just say it like that. Don't blame the people involved when it's not that. But if you're trying to mask it to kind of like lighten it, don't do that, because I think people will become frustrated and skeptical from it. And I think the thing is, like, even though that it's really hard to have these direct conversations, and it is, I get it. Like, I think we've all been there too, where it's like, not to overstate. I know that we all kind of were like, you should just have these conversations, but I think that we've all probably been in situations where it's been a little bit harder. It's a little more personal, and it's hard to have that conversation. But having the conversation also builds trust. So whether that's from manager to employee or employee to manager, or, peer to peer, whatever, I think it builds more trust, even though it's a little bit scary too.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, Bethany, because I think we can make it sound easy, like, oh, this is just so easy to do. Just confront it, just go do it. And you're totally right. Like, these are hard conversations to have. And it's hard to give people feedback, maybe about how they're doing something, or that they made a mistake, or the way that they're interacting with the team is not helpful, or like, even if it's overt, right? Like, sometimes you even struggle with that. Like, someone's overtly being toxic at work. They're being unkind to other people. They're spreading gossip and rumors. And that doesn't make it any easier either, like if it's overt, because then you got to go and you're like, oh my gosh, am I about to like walk up to like the bull in the china shop and ask it to stop moving around so much? And it's like angry. So these are hard conversations to have, but I think that would be, part of our message with this is like, this is going to take some courage, and it's going to take putting yourself out there a little bit, but you will get to a resolution much quicker if you're willing to address it. Otherwise, the problem is probably going to hang there for a long time. And, even though there are some things that will naturally resolve, a lot of it, if people don't know that something's wrong, they don't know that they should be changing how they're doing something, they don't know they should be changing how they're approaching people on the team. I mean, we're kind of creatures of habit. We're probably just going to keep doing it the way we've been doing it because that's the way we've been doing it. And we don't like to admit that we operate that way as humans, but we do. And so that would be, I think, like, where it's going to take some courage to address these things, because they're probably not just going to totally go away. You might see some peaks in improvement, but it's not going to change if we can't have a conversation.
Yeah. I also, courage is like such a great word for it. I also think that people are going to have to, recognize the emotions that are involved, right? If someone is upset or sad or angry or frustrated, I think the person bringing that feedback just has to recognize those emotions and say things like, I understand that you're mad. I totally get why you're frustrated. I would be too, right? And just sort of align yourself emotionally with that person so they know that you're not missing the mark. They know that you get it. And I think where they're at, like, alignment is nice going into those conversations.
Yeah, that's a good point. What about some of the things that we talked about in terms of like the fears that people have around these conversations, or why people don't address it, is like if they feel like really it's really not my place, if it's like, this isn't my lane, I don't know if this is my role to speak into specifically, but it is an elephant. I am frustrated by this thing. I feel like there's a tough discussion here, but I'm just not really sure if it's like really my job to do that. What do you say to those people?
I will say that I, as a manager, have had people come to me and say things like, I'm really frustrated with this situation. And it's sometimes stuff that's not on my radar that I didn't know about. It's sometimes stuff that I've been thinking about, and then I can engage them and ask questions and be like, okay, I've been thinking about this too. I'm glad it's stuck on you. And it's sometimes stuff that like I've been dealing with for years and thought that the team didn't notice. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a lot to be said for someone to encourage someone else to look at a problem. So I love it when people come to me and say, hey, I'm struggling with this thing or this process or this person or whatever it is. And then I've also, as a leader, had people come to me after I resolved an issue and been like, thank you, this was bothering me for so long. And I was like, oh, why didn't you say so? Like, I would have dealt with it sooner if I thought it was affecting others, right? But I did the thing where I was like, I don't know, I'll fix it slowly. It's probably not that big of a deal. It's maybe just me. And so I always encourage people, like, go tell your supervisor, tell them that you're frustrated with the situation. And it might mean that your supervisor says like, oh, you're frustrated with your coworker. Let me coach you through that conversation so that you can go have that. Right. But at least it's another valid data point that helps people have these difficult conversations. And so I'm always forever preaching, like, go tell people when you're frustrated. But I also know that that's difficult. It's hard. It's scary.
I love that was your advice, Diana, because I think the advice that has been preached widely is anytime an employee comes with you about a problem, about another employee, your first question should be, what did they say when you talked to them about that? And it's not that that's bad advice, because like you were saying, Diana, sometimes that is the advice we're going to give, but it's not always the right advice for the moment. And to your point, like if I'm a manager, it is data, like if you think about that, it's data collection. I'm going to actually get to hear from people in their own words how this problem is impacting them or how this person is impacting them at work. And my advice might still be, man, it sounds like you just need to talk to them. And maybe it is just like an interpersonal difference or we just have a different perspective on that, but it might not be. And I think sometimes I've seen managers trying to do the right thing and trying to empower their team to address conflict, that they just push all of the resolution back on the team. And then the team is dealing with some pretty like significant problems or significant errors, or it feels like now the team is the only one giving each other feedback, which again, there's a range of like healthy and unhealthy there. And it's a fine line, I think, between the two. So I love that you gave that advice, like as a manager, like first, like listen, like what is the problem that they're actually dealing with? And then determine like, okay, maybe as the manager, do I need to step in and like kind of like take over in this situation? Do I need to mediate a conversation? Or, am I gonna say, hey, I do really think I would like for you to go talk to them first and then come back to me and tell me how that conversation went. So I think that's great advice, because I think, the advice that gets preached normally is just like, turn that employee around and send them back out. And it's not, it sometimes is right, but sometimes it's not.
And I'll out us a little bit. I think each and every one of you have come to me and said like, hey, this might not be my lane, but I'm seeing this thing and I just want you to know I'm seeing it and it's affecting me in this way. And man, I love it when you guys do that for me, because it does direct me in the right direction. And it makes me see that you guys are seeing things that are affecting you. And I want to know what that is. And none of you have been like, I'm complaining or I'm mad, you've just been like, I see this thing and I think it's a pain in our sides. And I just want you to know that I see it. And if I can help, let me know. And man, that's so powerful for me. Like, I love it when you guys do that.
Yeah.
And it's good language to use. Like if you feel like you need to bring something to your leader, is like, hey, I'm seeing this or I'm experiencing this. And so it's sharing the information with them without necessarily passing like an extreme judgment on it. Like don't walk in and be like, Bethany did X, Y, and Z, Diana. What are you going to do about it? It's like, what's wrong with you, Bethany?
Don't include me in it. I don't want
to, but that was great language to use, because I think that's helpful. Like, here's what I'm seeing of like, I'll use my name. Like, Stephanie's doing these things and it's different than how I'm doing this. And so then it makes it hard for us to do that together versus like Stephanie's doing all of this wrong and she's breaking all of the rules, which is probably something people say all the time. It's fine. I've heard it before. But like, I think just using that language, like, this is what I'm seeing. It's good because I'm too flexible for that. But it's like, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm experiencing, I think is a great way to bring something to your manager. I like that language.
And to note that, like, but like we've said, by the way, this might not be in my lane. I just want to bring it to you. And I've talked to people about that too, like coaching them to say, like, when somebody's really frustrated with something and saying, like, yeah, have you talked to your manager about it? And then I'm feeling frustrated about, like, I don't know if it's really my place. It's somebody else on the team. And I think it's like, well, just bring it up and say, like, but then I think it's knowing, and I've said this probably before on the podcast, is like, then it's knowing that you have to, like, you've given it to your boss and you need to step away and let them handle it if it doesn't involve you. It's really not your job to continue to, like, hold your boss accountable in that way to how they're managing their team, even if it's frustrating to you. I think there's a line that you have to draw there too, but that doesn't mean you can't have the first conversation about it. So I think that's really good. And then, for the manager, you guys touched on some really good things about, like, how do you coach your team through that? Sometimes you do have to coach them through it if it's something they're involved in, and how to manage that conflict internally, or how much you might need to get involved as well. And so be willing to listen. I think sometimes, and this is probably where some fear comes in for people, sometimes managers, whenever they are brought a conflict or a situation like this, they just throw their hands up and they're like, oh my gosh, they're never happy. I can't deal with this. It's so annoying. It's just like kids, and it's like, man, that's not the right way to handle this. Is like, this is your job, and you've got to listen to people, and you've got to be able to figure out, like, is this your moment to coach somebody, or is this your moment to, like, where you need to step in and go work with your team a little bit better and figure out what's going on, and help address the conflict. And it's part of the job, man.
Difficult conversations do make workplaces better. It's harder, but it makes it better. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right. Any final words, my friends?
Don't put it off. I think that's don't put it off. Just have the conversation. It sucks. It's hard, but, like, just don't put it off.
And sometimes it's not as scary as you think it's going to be. So,
hopefully.
Yeah. Like, what if it all worked out?
I like that.
If best case scenario happened.
I like it.
That's good. All right. Well, thank you for joining us again on the People Centric Podcast. We love talking with you. You know how to get a hold of us. Diana lets you know at the end of every podcast. So email us and tell us your thoughts. Give us your feedback. Tell us if you hated the topic or if you loved it, because we really want your direct communication.
Give us the feedback. We want it.
We want the feedback. Have a difficult conversation with us, and it'll probably make us better. So anyways, have a great day. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.